Hey YouTube. In this video I want to talk about 7 prepper lessons that I learned while I was staying in Afghanistan. I was in Afghanistan in 2003 and I was doing NGO work or non-governmental organization, which basically means I was working for a nonprofit. We had gone into Afghanistan, there's a team of total of 25 of us, and we'd gone there to provide medical relief. As you can imagine, this was right after September 11th, and the United States had gone in and kicked out most of the Taliban out of Kabul, at least. And the citizens of Kabul, most of these people hadn't seen any real medical relief in quite a long time, since probably the 70s. As you remember, they had a lot of Russia had come in during the 70s and 80s and had left. And then when they left in the late 80s, Afghanistan really fell into a state of disarray and a collapse where different warlords were fighting to take control over the country and different territories. So a lot of these people, when we got there, these people had been through some really extreme stuff, some really tough times, to say the least. It's just very common to hear stories from people where they'd watched a lot of family members, been killed. And these people just had a really, really rough condition. It's kind of a understatement. They've been through some really, really tough times. And so these people that we met and that we were able to serve while we were in Afghanistan, I was there for 3 months. These people, they really learned how to survive, and they've had to learn the hard way. Again, after being through so many decades of war and fighting, things are really tough for them. So what I'd like to talk about are 7 lessons that I was able to walk away from after being in Afghanistan for those 3 months. Again, I was not associated with any military, had no military protection. We were just civilians living in a part of Kabul is called Kartasay, which is like the 3rd district. It's basically, at one time when pre-war, it was a really nice area. And so a lot of the buildings were still standing. Obviously, a lot of them had, everything just had bullet holes in it. You would see a lot of holes in the side of buildings where, things that different explosions had gone off. Just everything was pretty much destroyed. And so while we were there serving the people, there was a lot of lessons I really had to learn, unfortunately, in some cases the hard way. The first thing I really learned while staying in Afghanistan was situational awareness. We're really a society that we're constantly on our phones. We're not really always paying attention to what's going on around us. And when I was in Afghanistan, I really had to learn this lesson quickly. You really had to keep your head on a swivel. And it's a very, again, being a Westerner, being an American for that matter, I was what was defined as what you would call a soft target. It was something that if a terrorist wanted to make a statement, someone like myself, it was very easy to target someone like myself because, there was no way I could really fight or, I wasn't part of the military. So I was an easy target. And we did have an incident actually while we were in Afghanistan as a team where we had a hand grenade toss in our van that we used to transport us to the university there at Kabul University. And fortunately, it did not detonate. We were very fortunate. But there was times where I would go out into the general population and we had situations come up that were pretty scary. And one in particular that I wasn't really practicing situational awareness was there was a large bazaar in the downtown part of Kabul, and it was called Titanic Bazaar. I don't know if they've renamed it since then, but the culture there at the time, back in '03, they were really obsessed with the movie Titanic, so everything was named Titanic. It was kind of funny. So while I was there, there was a couple of individuals, a couple of girls on our team that I went into the bazaar with. One of them wore some really bright yellow colors on an outfit she was wearing, and which in that culture it stands out where most people are wearing like a powder blue or some kind of earth tones. And so she really stood out. And as we were in the bazaar, there was a lot of people there. And as we were walking, about 30 minutes into it, we turned around to see a huge crowd beginning to follow us. At this point, I knew that we had to get out of there very quickly. I knew something was wrong. And the crowd was really bearing down on us. By the time we were able to get outside of the bazaar, I lost track how many people were surrounding us, but fortunately there was a taxi that was available. We were able to jump in and take off very quickly, even though we were surrounded by a crowd. And it taught me in that moment that situational awareness is so critical and key. You have to really watch what's going on around you at all times. Things can change in a moment's notice. And talking about wearing bright colors, we'll get into that in point 2. But before I finish this on point 1, things can escalate quickly if you're not paying attention. It's really important that you keep, a good, good watch of what's going around you without making it obvious. I try, even into this day and age, I still try. For example, if I'm at a gas pump, just watch what's going on around me. Don't just sit there and stare at my cell phone. Places like that are easy places, for someone to, if they're trying to steal your car or take money. It's just little simple things. It's not that you have to be paranoid, but just keep, keep looking around and understand what's going on around you at all times. The second point, as I kind of alluded to a second ago, is learn how to blend in, what's also known as a gray man approach. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about what a gray man approach is. You can Google it, but basically it's, not standing out, making nothing, having nothing on you, or the way you look, the clothes you're wearing, not being not making yourself stand out. That if someone saw you and they had to recall the story of seeing you, they wouldn't really remember anything about you, because there was nothing that stood out about you. You weren't wearing a camouflage jacket. You weren't wearing a NRA hat. You didn't have tattoos on your arm. You just looked like one of the civilian population. When I first arrived in Afghanistan, I didn't look like an Afghan, which was obvious. I just looked like a typical American. And over time, what I began to do is I allowed my beard to grow out. I began to adopt their clothing, and it made it a lot easier when I went into public to not really stand out. Standing out draws unwanted attention. Having cool tactical clothing, being tactical, backpacks with Molly all over it, and things that if I look at half my gear, I realize that most of my gear is almost set up that way, and it's made me reconsider how I just the way I appear. I don't really want to stand out. The next thing, in point 3, one of the things I learned while in Afghanistan that and again, this is not only prepping, but this is just good everyday life skills, is avoid confrontation. One time we were in the downtown area of Kabul, and we were just trying to drive to get to somewhere. And a large crowd of people were chasing this man down down this intersection, at the intersection that we were at. And I knew at that moment, even though they were about 100 yards out, the crowd was pretty big. I immediately told our driver, turn around, get us out of there. I did not want to be stuck in traffic with a large crowd of people surrounding us. There was another time where I was running in a taxi by myself, which in retrospect I shouldn't have done. Typically we would always go in at least pairs whenever we would go anywhere in Kabul. But for whatever reason, I couldn't get anybody to go with me. I was by myself. The taxi was just, I needed somewhere to go. It wasn't very far. And it's a drive that I do every day. And the guy started taking me down some weird paths that I just knew he was trying to basically lengthen the time to try to, drive up the cost. And when we arrived at my location that he was dropping me off, he began to hustle me. And he got really confrontational, and he was trying to get more money out of me. I knew what he was saying, even though I didn't necessarily speak the language that well. But I knew enough from his body language and what he was trying to communicate that he was trying to get, he was trying to get very confrontational, trying to get money out of me. And in that moment, for me, I just played stupid, and I just kind of went along and pretended like I didn't understand what he was saying, even though I did. And I tried to get away from the situation and try to get someone involved that was nearby at the house I was at, and again, trying to pass off and move away. And it worked. I paid him his money, and but he was trying to get a lot more out of me. And but in that situation, I just played dumb. I tried to stay cool. I did not look for a fight or try to escalate or fight back. Typically in those situations, confrontation, anytime you read in any type of manuals or books about situations where there's conflict, especially in a prepper situation where you may have a crowd or individuals trying to get something from you, steal, etc. At the end of the day, you're just not going to want to try to engage in some gunfight or something like that, even though you may be, you may have weapons on your person. And you may even have a right to defend yourself or stand your ground. At the end of the day, it's just not going to play out well. Someone's going to get hurt. Avoid confrontation where you can, if possible. And again, I have to put that caveat, if possible. There are times where you may not be able to back down, and you may be stuck in a corner, and you may have to defend you or your family. But if possible, stay away from it. Number 4, sanitation. I graduated with a degree in microbiology. I worked in the restaurant industry for 8 years. So understanding basic sanitation, what, basic food handling, your own personal sanitation, cleaning your hands. A lot of these things I had to learn obviously in college and then, working in the food industry, but really got to see working in labs in college, how easy it is to transfer illnesses. If you're in a grid down situation, you're in a situation as preppers prepare for being in a situation where maybe a disaster hits your area. Understanding just basic sanitation, like, hey, how do I wash my dishes? How do I use hot soapy water? How do I use bleach and water to disinfect? How do I make water safe for drinking? You just can't drink water out of the stream. I mean, if you ever contracted Giardia or beaver fever, you know what that's like, and it's not a lot of fun. I used to mountain climb, and I contracted Giardia. One of the worst experiences of my life. And I'll still remember to this day, and it's a reminder why not to, make sure you properly sanitize your water. One of the other things, and again, speaking of sanitation and learning how to do, just basic uses of water. Even when I was in Afghanistan, we had to learn how, because water was so scarce, we had to learn how to keep it clean, how to take a bath out of a bucket of water, and that's it every day. And there's little things like that you can learn at this time that will really be critical whenever you need those skills. So I would encourage you begin to learn how to, or rather store bleach in your house, dish soap, because these kind of things can come in handy, disinfectant. These things can come in handy if there is a grid down situation. One of the other things you also want to have stored in your preps is a good medical kit in the event that you have minor cuts, scrapes. Those kind of things, if left untended, can grow into severe situations quickly. Imagine a grid down situation where you may not have access to a doctor or basic medical facilities. Having good sanitation is going to be critical. Point number 5, be flexible. One of the things I learned in Afghanistan is things don't always go as planned. Living in Afghanistan, I love the country, is a beautiful place, but it's a third world country that was, at the time I was there, was right. They'd just come out of major, decades of fighting and war. And the concept of organization and things that you and I take for granted in the United States, where things are organized and really well kept together, things rarely went as planned when I was in Afghanistan. You could plan to go and do something, or go to the bank, or try to book a airline ticket, and their systems were just not organized there. And so you were lucky if you got something you thought would take an hour, it would maybe take all day. And so you had to learn how to be flexible. You couldn't get frustrated, and you had to have backup plans. Okay, if this doesn't work, okay, how do we go and do this? If plan A doesn't work, what's our plan B in this situation? Always have a backup plan. Be flexible. And when things don't go right, don't freak out. I'm a control freak. I love things being done a certain way, but I had to learn very quickly when I was in Afghanistan that things just can change on a moment's notice. And there's an old saying in the prepping community, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. This kind of applies here. Having a backup plan, you may think this one thing is going to work properly and it doesn't. And, it's good to always, again, have backup plans. Number 6, the value of a team. A team is so critical. Again, I worked with a team of 25. Well, there's 25 of us in total most of the time while I was there. Most of the team was comprised of physicians. We had people on the team with a lot of different skill sets. We had a handyman, so many different skill sets that came in handy. Really, my kind of position on the team was a jack of all trades. I helped where things were needed. Helped teach a lot at Kabul University, teach English. And be sure, to begin to develop relationships in advance in your neighborhood. Find people with certain skill sets. Number 1, if you can find somebody with military experience, that's huge. Number 2, find somebody that is a physician. Begin to build a relationship. It's not that you have to sit down with this person and just dump all your information that, hey, I've got all these preps over here, and which makes yourself a target, but rather begin to build relationships with people that have skill sets that you don't have, that can complement areas where you're weak. point number 7 when I learned in Afghanistan is keep a positive attitude. One of the things that's interesting if you read any type of survival books is the aspect of morale and keeping a positive attitude. There was a book that I believe it was Unbreakable. It came out, Angelina Jolie did the movie about a year and a half ago. The book was amazing. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to do so. But there's a big part of the book where the main character in the story is stranded on a raft with one of his fellow pilots. Their plane went down in the Pacific, and they had to survive, I want to say like 46 days. It was some crazy number. And there was a third person on the boat that he didn't survive simply because his attitude was he just gave up. And they all had the same problems. They all had the same lack of resources, but one of the people on the boat, his attitude was he couldn't make it. And the other two, even though just really adverse conditions, those two chose to stay positive and to keep fighting and pushing ahead, and they survived. And so one of the things I really learned quickly is having a positive attitude is critical in a situation where you may have grid down, you may have things just going wrong. It really doesn't help to be negative. Again, I know this. I'm speaking, to myself here. I tend to be very negative a lot, and it's easy for me to focus on what's wrong as opposed to choosing to say, you know what, I have to choose to have a positive attitude and to move forward with that attitude. Especially if you have a family, they're going to be looking to you. I was very fortunate when I was in Afghanistan. Most of the team that I worked with was Filipinos on our team. Some of the most happy people you'll ever meet. A lot of the people that are on our team that were Filipinos, they came from situations that weren't terribly different than what we were living in. Obviously, there wasn't the war-torn aspect, but they didn't really come from really nice houses and all the things that we have as Americans. They came from very little, and so they really challenged me a lot in my own attitude. They just were constantly happy, and it made a big difference. It made the team overall extremely positive because we were able to feed off that energy. So again, what I'm not advocating is some kind of just happy-go-lucky, nothing's wrong attitude, but you have to really choose in your own mind. Hey, am I going to let this tear me down and be negative about it? Because that's infectious. Are you going to let that begin to tear you down? Because that can affect everybody else as well. It can spread a lot of negativity. And I encourage you, try to find a way to be positive, and you'll get through it. So those are the 7 lessons I learned while I was in Afghanistan, that as I'm preparing my own home for any potential situation that may come. I live in Southern California. One of my biggest threats that I face is earthquake. And so these are things that I hope that, should a major catastrophe happen in my area, I'll be prepared for by simply taking these lessons that I learned in Afghanistan and applying it in my own life, my own family. And I hope it gives you some ideas as well as you prepare for everyday situations. As always, I look forward to your feedback in the comments below, and if you like this channel, please subscribe. And again, I appreciate you watching this video.